And we're back for Story of the Day for Year 3 to Year 6, and it's Grandpa's Great Escape by David Walliams, and we're returning to Chapter 38. And yesterday, at the end of Chapter 37, Jack suddenly realised something. He realised something dark, something creepy, something so sinister, it chilled him to the bone. Let's find out what that is. Chapter 38, Dummies. Jack realised that none of the old folk in the living room were moving of their own accord. The brawny nurses of Twilight Towers were actually manipulating them as a ventriloquist might their dummy. One old man with a hearing aid that whistled loudly seemed to be clapping along to the music. But when you looked again, you realised Nurse Rose was holding his hands in hers. The old lady appeared to be bopping her head along. Look again, it was being moved in time by Nurse Blossom. A third elderly inmate with a ruddy nose and a monocle gave the impression he was the champion ballroom dancer. The short man was whisking a tall nurse round the living room as if it were a dance floor. Or was he? On closer inspection, it was Nurse Violet who was leading. She was holding up the little old man. His slippers scraped along the ground. His eyes were closed and he was snoring loudly. As well as the Bunting family, there were quite a few visitors to Twilight Towers that afternoon. This was the only 15 minutes of the week that anyone could come after all. Among them, an old man wearing milk bottle-thick glasses looked as if he was visiting his wife. The woman, tiny like a little bird, was playing draughts with him. But in reality, it was one of the beefiest nurses, Nurse Tulip, who had stuck her arm through the old lady's cardigan and was moving the pieces on her behalf. The giveaway to Jack was that the little old lady now had massive, hairy hands. Meanwhile, a couple of toddlers sat with a rather round old lady who must have been their grandmother. The children's mother looked completely disinterested and sat there, flicking through a dog-eared magazine. The old lady appeared to be patting the children's head, but Jack spotted a piece of fishing wire attached to her hands. His eyes followed the fishing wire, which glinted a little in the light. It stretched across the room, ending behind the curtain. Hiding there was another nurse, Nurse Hyacinth, with a fishing rod. As the nurse twitched the rod up and down, so moved the old lady's hand. "This is wicked," thought Jack. "No doubt Miss Swine put on this absurd show every Sunday afternoon at Twilight Towers, just for the visitors." It might have fooled most people, but not Jack. "Miss Swine, where's my grandpa?" the boy demanded. "What have you done to him?" Matron simply smiled at the boy. "As soon as you arrived, I sent for your grandfather. I believe he will be joining us here at the party any second now." Right on cue, the door to the living room swung open. Grandpa was in an ancient wooden wheelchair, being pushed by Nurse Daisy, she of the gold tooth and tattoo of the skull on her arm. The old man appeared to be fast asleep. "Oh no," thought the boy, "they must have force-fed him his sleeping pills after all." As Nurse Daisy pushed Grandpa into position in front of the flickering television, Jack rushed over to him. Knowing of their special bond, Mum and Dad held back for a moment. The boy grasped the old man's tight. "What have they done to you?" he asked aloud, not expecting a response. Suddenly, Grandpa opened one of his eyes. It revolved around to focus on his grandson. "Ah, there you are, Squadron Leader," whispered the old man. "Come under cover, have you?" With slight hesitation, the boy nodded. "Yes, Wing Commander." "Jolly good show. I must say those smarties worked a treat." With that, the old man winked, and his grandson couldn't help but smile. Grandpa had fooled them. Then the old man looked around the room before saying, "So, Squadron Leader, how do you fancy stepping outside to do some gardening?" Jack understood exactly what this meant and winked back. Chapter 39, Bonkers. Miss Swine watched like a hawk as Grandpa and Jack disappeared out of the living room together. As families were visiting Twilight Towers that day, the front door was unlocked, so the pair of them went out and made their way across the garden. Jack's mother and father stayed inside the warm living room, and they watched them from the window. As soon as there was a safe distance from the main building, Grandpa slipped Jack a couple of socks filled with dirt. These he had instructed to stuff down his trousers, one for each leg. And as soon as they reached the rather pitiful flower bed, the boy took his grandfather's lead. Waddling like a pair of penguins, First Grandpa, then Jack, pulled on the elastic bands, tipping the socks up and releasing the dirt. It trickled down their legs and out the bottom of their trousers. After checking the nurses high up from the observation towers not looking, they patted the dirt into the soil of the flower bed with their feet. Was that all the soil from last night, Wing Commander? Roger, Squadron Leader, replied Grandpa proudly. Jack looked down at the tiny amount of dirt. It couldn't have been more than a few cans worth. At this rate, the tunnel wouldn't be dug to 2083. The thing is, the boy started a sentence, but couldn't quite finish it for fear of hurting the old man's feelings. Spit it out, man, demanded Grandpa. Well, the thing is, I worry the tunnel is going to take forever, if that's all the dirt you can get out in one night. The old man looked at the boy with disdain. Have you ever tried to dig through a stone floor armed only with a spoon? This answer required no thought at all. Like most people on Earth, Jack had never been so foolish to attempt such a task. No. Well, I don't mind telling you, it's hard work, exclaimed Grandpa. So how can I help you with the escape plan? The old man thought for a moment. Smuggle me in a bigger spoon. With respect, Wing Commander, I don't think the size of the spoon is going to make that much difference. I'll try anything to get out of this infernal prisoner of war camp. As a British officer, it is my duty to escape. You must promise to bring me another spoon tomorrow night, demanded Grandpa. A soup spoon? This is a mighty task, man. I need a serving spoon. I promise, sir, Jack murmured. Squadron Leader, the only thing that keeps me going is the thought of getting back in my Spitfire. At that moment, Miss Swine's suspicions must have got the better of her as she bounded out of the building at speed. The lady tottered across the garden in her high-heeled boots, her cape flapping in the wind. Two of her sinister helpers were at her side, Nurse Rose and Nurse Blossom. They were both so big and brawny that it looked more like matron security guards than anything else. Trailing behind were Mum and Dad, huffing and puffing to keep up. On gardening duty, are we? Called Matron, her words riddled with distrust. Yes, that's right, just tending these flower beds, Commandant, shouted Grandpa. Commandant? Repeated the silly swine. Matron laughed. The two nurses were a bit slow on the uptake. After a moment, they joined in with the laughter. Ha 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 ha. As Mum and Dad reached the flower bed, Miss Swine held court for a moment. Oh, you do have to have a good sense of humour to work here at Twilight Towers. We certainly do, Matron, replied Nurse Rose in a very gruff voice. So many of my old folk have gone gaga, but Grandpa here is the most gaga of them all. How dare you, said the boy. Don't be rude to nice Matron, son, said Mum. Look at him, exclaimed Matron. This man is bonkers. No, my name's not Bonkers, it's Bunting, corrected Grandpa. I think there is Flight Lieutenant Bonkers with 501 Squadron over in Gloucester. Oh dear, murmured Matron. Well, it's getting rather chilly out here, don't you think? Yes, Matron, said Dad, who, being so skinny, was shivering slightly with the cold. Nurses, would you be kind enough to help poor Mr. Bunting back inside? Ordered Miss Swine. That's Wing Commander Bunting, protested Grandpa. Yes, of course it is, replied Miss Swine sarcastically. Together, Nurse Rose and Nurse Blossom picked up the old man by his ankles, dangling him upside down. They marched him back into the building. Let go of them, shouted the boy. Do they have to carry him like that? Said Dad. It's good for his bad back, replied Matron. Jack couldn't take it any more, and he launched himself at one of the nurses' backs. In an instant, she swatted him as if he were a fly. Jack! Exclaimed Mum, as she pulled him back by the arm. I won't talk, you know, shouted the old man as he was carried off. I would rather die than betray my king and country. Oh, he does make me giggle, said the matron, before looking at her watch. Well, we should all be getting back inside to enjoy the party. There's still 2 whole minutes left of visiting time. Matron ushered Mum and Dad ahead. "Please, after you, Barbara and Barry." But then Miss Swine loitered for a moment to have a private word with Jack. "I know you are up to something, you nasty little child," she hissed. "I'll be watching you." A shiver ran down the boy's spine. And tomorrow we'll pick up at chapter 40, and it is called A Rope Pair of Knickers.